Welcome to Life with Strings Attached Special Biography Edition. I'm your host, Jamie Gale. These special biography episodes were recorded to capture the life stories of the people behind the unique world-class guitars they're known for. It's been my experience that these remarkable ideas come from remarkable people who have a depth and character that cannot be easily distinguished from the things that they create. Their instruments make a lot more sense when you get to know the person who created them. So I've spent decades getting to know these wonderful creators in order to better understand their work, and now you can too. I hope that you enjoy this special biography edition of Life with Strings Attached.
So those moments in your life, where were you? You were born in Ottawa? Where were you born?
I was born in Ottawa. I am actually one of not too many people who are born and bred and lived forever in Ottawa. Yeah, my parents, neither of them were from around here, but just, life brought them here, and they met because they were both musically inclined. My mom is a music teacher, or was a music teacher, now retired. My dad was an amateur musician for his whole life. Besides being a scientist, and the son of a scientist, they were all highly musical family, so he was playing violin with the symphony orchestra when he was like 6 years old kind of thing. And, sort of kept it up. So it just sort of happened naturally that, I would take music lessons too. So I did, even starting when I was like 5, or even before that, ORF classes. You ever heard of ORF classes?
Yeah. Familiar, yeah.
Started doing that, just simple claves and xylophones when I was a little kid. Violin lessons when I was 5, which I was not ready for them. And then I started playing cello when I was 7. And that's when it sort of stuck. Although, to be honest, I didn't really enjoy it or seek it out. It was something my parents told me I was going to be doing, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
And you go to class, once a week, and you practice supposedly every day, and just sort of kept going with it. But I thought it was just something that everybody had to do. I actually remember asking somebody in school. I was like, when I met somebody, when I went to a new school, oh, so what do you play? And then be like, Donkey Kong. I got an Atari. And I was like, no, I mean, what musical instrument? And they're like, huh? So yeah, you start to realize that, oh, actually, it doesn't have to be like this. Until a certain age, I guess in middle school, in Ottawa specifically, you have to learn a band instrument. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll switch to the bassoon, because at least it's in the bass clef. I don't have to learn a new clef. So I started playing bassoon for a few years, and I was pretty good at that. Actually, yeah, I studied on a scholarship at the Hull Conservatory, now called the Gatineau Conservatory. But bassoon is quite limiting, I guess. Yeah, it was something you had to do for school, and if I was going to do it, well, I might as well be good at it. And so I started playing with the Ottawa Junior Youth Orchestra and that kind of thing, and then in the Hull Conservatory Orchestra. And being a bassoon player in that kind of scenario is, in an orchestra, you get pages and pages of just counting out rests, and you'll play 3 notes, da, 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 and then you'll have 35 bars where you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, but much slower.
Yeah.
And then the conductor goes, and you're like, I thought is it 35 already? So yeah, I was not cut out for it. But, and also, like, none of the cool kids play bassoon, and when you watch Wayne's World came out when I was like 13, and I was like, I gotta play guitar. And so as soon as I could, I quit the bassoon and started playing guitar. And that was way cooler. That was what, and then you could hang it with your friends at lunch hour and trade chords and learn Led Zeppelin songs or whatever. And that was, that was way better. So yeah, well, I'd say, my journey to becoming a musical instrument maker started in part by being a musician and then, trying to find what aspect of music was fulfilling. And it was being in a band playing guitar and listening to old records and that I liked and, and thinking to myself, yeah, maybe if I had that guy's guitar, I would sound better. And that's sort of what led me to being a guitar maker, is thinking, maybe if I had a cooler guitar, I'd be a better guitar player, or a cooler guitar player. The whole image is tied in very much with the sound. Being in a rock band isn't just about, the sound and the tone and playing the right notes. You know this intuitively. And so, yeah, I thought to myself, I'll build a different guitar from the one I've got, and that'll make me cooler. Yeah. Actually, I know which one inspired my first guitar was when I listened to the George Thorogood and the Destroyers, the first album. And he's playing like a ES 150 or somewhere 175 from, the 1950s, and he threw a Fender champ, like it's bare bones, basic rock and roll. And, and that's like, he's not a good player, but it's awesome. And, and you just hear this like dirty jump blues, and you're like, I don't know, somehow it just resonated with me, like, that's awesome. That's rugged, it's raw, I can play that. Yeah. And so I built, my first guitar was going to be an archtop guitar, just based on the picture on the front of the album cover. And yeah, so that was what I tried to do. First off the bat was a thin line archtop guitar of my own design that I doodled in a math textbook or something at some point.
And how old were you then?
Let's see, I guess it was 18 when I started sort of doodling, and then I actually got started with the building of it when I was 19.
You're 19.
Yeah.
And was that your first woodworking project?
Oh, well, no, then that's the other thing, is it sort of ties together from, so music is one stream, being a musician is one stream, but also being a maker of things is sort of the other aspect. And that was also where I guess some of us grow up naturally being mechanically minded people. And so, if you start playing with Lego when you're 3 years old, or, just being one of those kids who builds towers out of blocks that are, taller than your brothers and sisters' towers of blocks. And you're like, haha, my tower is better. And then they throw a marble at it and everything comes clattering down. You're like, damn it, I'm like, it's stronger next time.
Yes.
That's the beginnings of a mechanical engineer. And so, yeah, I was always somebody who would make things, starting with Lego, or, my dad would buy me like a plastic model airplane kit or something. And so actually, I think when I was 5 or 6 years old, he gave me a model airplane kit, and I put this together, and it was really cool. So I built a bunch more, and then I'd build airplanes that are made out of balsa wood and covered out of tissue paper and powered by rubber bands, and you'd see how long they can stay in the air. And again, I were pretty good, and I really like building things. And then quickly, instead of following a pattern, I'm like, I'm going to draw my own pattern, make my own design. And so I'd make like delta wing things, and what happens if I put 2 propellers on it, and and build that. So yeah, being a creative, instinctively want to be like, let's not follow the instructions on the box kind of person, allows you to build things without instructions. And so I started building a guitar without a mentor, really, without instruction. There were couple of books from the library that I borrowed here and there, but it just sort of naturally followed it on from that. Let's try and build this and see what happens. So yeah, and those 2 streams of, being a builder of things, a creative builder of things, and being a musician. They just sort of join together in guitar.
Now, was that odd for you? Were you the inquisitor within your family, or do you have a history of curious and...
My dad is he was a computer engineer and a quantum physicist, actually, for a while. But, I used his tools. He had a wood shop, and he encouraged, by buying me the bits and pieces I would need to build stuff. So yeah, he was very much encouraging of, scientific inquiry and making of things. Although I think he was quite proud when I started to surpass him. Like when, hey, let's build some model airplanes together with the rubber band and see, and see how long we can fly them. There's a club that rents out a gym, and then you can fly them indoors. And my rubber band powered airplane was, flew a lot longer than his. And he's like, oh, good. Good. So, I guess I got that from my dad being just naturally enjoying making things. And he had the tools and the skills to sort of get me started. He in fact built a musical instrument too. He apprenticed or took some courses with a viola maker in England when he was a student there, and built a viola da gamba. And we're talking like mid 1960s. And he still has that viola da gamba. Because he was, as a musician, interested in early Baroque music. That really, drew him in. And the viola da gamba is a Baroque musical instrument. And
was he a string player?
He played whatever was around. But yeah, I guess you start with piano because that teaches you theory. But also, he played violin. Yeah. And
so he could approach a viola da gamba.
Oh yeah,
he knew how to bow. He knew how to.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not quite. And he played harpsichord. Actually, we had a harpsichord in our house too, like a really good harpsichord that was not vintage, but made, I guess in the early '70s by, was it William Post Ross of Boston? So he was part of this sort of Baroque music revival that was happening in the '60s and '70s. And so I guess that also sort of had an influence. And in fact, that viola da gamba was sort of the model I used. Well, that and he has a very old violin, which was a Stainer copy, not by Stainer, but by one of his school from the 1700s. And so that violin and the viola da gamba sort of served as models for my first archtop guitar, which I still have, still plays great. I love it. But yeah, the arching on a Stainer school violin is very different from, George Thorogood's ES-175 or whatever it is. And that was the only archtop acoustic instrument I had access to in Ottawa, which is surprisingly kind of a backward small town in a lot of ways. And so that was what I used to build my first archtop guitar. And so it's a very steep arch and a flat back and a few things like that, and I just kind of winged the rest. But it worked.
It may not seem obvious to you because classically the fish is unaware of the water. And this was your water, it was your family, right? But the harpsichord is to the piano what the viola da gamba is to the viola or the viol family, the cellos and violins. It's the odd other choice in a modern sense. Of course, there's a great history behind it. And your work today shows you often choosing the odd other choice.
Yeah, I guess so. But again, if the easy choice, somebody's already doing that. Like, why do I want to? Why do you choose? Why would one choose what's already being done? Like, don't you want to make something new? If you're like, instead of your favorite phrase, reenacting the hero, why reenact the hero when you can be the hero? And the hero forges his own sword. He doesn't just, use the copy of, Excalibur.
I mean, that's probably the impetus for our relationship, isn't it? The fact that we both believe such a thing.
Yeah. And not
It defines
everybody
your
does.
work and mine.
Yeah. Not everybody feels this way, and that's fine. There's got to be people who are just trotting the same old path over and over again, because that's what makes it a path. And fine.
But your history is from a number of people that took the road less traveled. So again, you may not be so aware of it, but your grandfather has a very interesting history. We talked about
my great-grandfather.
Okay, your great-grandfather, as far as a scientist is concerned, his accomplishments. And then even further back, we talked about one of your family members deciding to, at 14 years old.
Oh, okay, yeah, that was my great-grandfather.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I think that's an interesting part of who you are, whether you really realize it or not. So,
yeah, I guess family history is something I've always been a little bit aware of. My dad, among his many interests, tracked our family tree very deeply, and our last name is, has very old roots. It's actually an old Norse name, but from England. And our last name is mentioned in the Domesday Book, 1,000 years ago. We have, a coat. Our family coat of arms is, I think the modern version dates from, not that long ago, but it's a rehashing of a design that's very simple and probably one of the original coats of arms from, 1,000 years ago. So I always knew that there's this deep family history of being not just, farmers or peasants or anything like that, but people forging new paths. If you think about it, my paternal ancestor from 1,000 years ago was probably a Viking. And since then, colonized Ireland, for better or for worse. Came to the New World, via China. My great-grandfather sailed on the Cutty Sark from England after being kicked out of his home, and traveled to China. And
what year would that have been, approximately?
1870s. Yeah, 1870s, roughly.
Very small percentage of people traveled from England to China in the 1870s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a big deal. It was like going to the moon.
Yeah.
And those clipper ships were like the space shuttles of their time. They were horrendously expensive. Took a lot of very specialized skills to make one of these things. And he traveled around the world and back again, and then onwards to the New World. And in fact, he didn't even just come to New York. He then traveled to California and took part in the California Gold Rush. And after the California Gold Rush, looking for something to do, a couple of Americans hired him as the token British citizen so they could go to the Klondike. Took part in the Klondike Gold Rush. Then went back around to Eastern Canada, got on the railroad that they were starting to build across the continent, went to the very end of the line and got off the train, kept going for another few dozen miles, and set up a homestead on the frontier, which is now Waskata, Winnipeg.
Okay.
Now kind of, not an unremarkable place, except for the fact that it is about as far from salt water as you can get. And that tells you how much he enjoyed his time on the sailing ship.
That's more of an adventure than I realized.
Yeah, it's quite a remarkable story. And then, my grandfather, again, incredible, was born in Waskata on the prairie, and not a sod house. It was, a proper wood house.
Yes.
But his mother died after childbirth, and so he had to be shipped to family back east on the brand new train as, a week-old infant. But he survived, which a lot of babies didn't, and he had nearly fatal appendicitis when he was 14 or 13 or something, and no antibiotics or anything like that, but he survived. Graduated from high school or went to Upper Canada College when he was, 16 or something, and went on to get 2 PhDs and found a company and that in the pulp and paper industry. He founded Brock University. So yeah, I was always aware that I come from a line of people who are smart but humble about it, and that, you know, we're here, but we could very easily not have been. I don't know what that means for me, but I guess, you know, learned.
It means that you're very casual about pretty remarkable things, to be honest.
Well, I didn't accomplish any of those things, so.
You have accomplishments, though. And I think that, you know, you've distinguished yourself as a guitar maker. Frankly, if you weren't, you wouldn't be in front of this camera right now. This is what we do. We find remarkable people who have
Remarkable
distinguished
within our field.
themselves within your field.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, there you are, downplaying it.
Yeah. Well, because let's be fair, it is a small field. It is not, you know, there are a lot of disciplines. I mean, I consider it fine to be able to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who would, you know, is a world-class economist or quantum physicist, even if I don't necessarily understand what they do. You know, we're going to sit down and you're going to share some coffee. I'm not going to be like, wow,
Yes.
you're my hero.
Yes.
You know, I've met my heroes, you know, like Ken Parker and Uli Teufel and just, you know,
Right.
they're just chill. It's like,
Are you aware that you have become or becoming someone who is?
somebody's hero?
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't met anybody who seems to approach me that way.
No. you know, I interviewed Uli Teufel only a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
He's also not really aware of his importance, frankly. And I think that's good. I think otherwise, you know, we get arrogant and, and prideful. But no, Mike, I hear people and the way they talk about you now, not as much when you first met, but now you've distinguished yourself. And so we've grown up. We have a history of interesting people who were clearly adventurers, in a way, breaking new ground. You know,
Often not intentionally, but presented with the do or die you choose to do.
No, a lot of people choose to die.
Yeah.
They do. They dig in their heels. They stay where they are. They don't hop the train. They don't get on the ship.
I guess so.
They don't. They go and get a regular job. They don't build guitars.
Yes.
So you again, I know you sort of normalize this, and well, let's talk about this for a second, because actually you have what I think is a wonderful family and a nice life, but you're married also to a creative, and so
Yes. But
how much of your connection to Helen do you think facilitates the fact that you became a guitar maker?
Oh, 100%. If I were one of those people who was like, I'm just going to work a day job and, you know, build guitars in the evening, you know, or I'm going to take a leap of faith and just jump in and be a guitar maker, sink or swim, I would have sunk, because I insisted on being creative about it. And that doesn't always fly. It takes, you know, forever. And if you can only apply yourself part-time, you just don't have enough time to really delve far enough. So, yeah, without Helen earning, and amazingly, she's also a creative and an artist, but she's managed to be successful enough that it pays the bills. Because guitar making pretty much hasn't most years. Sometimes I'll like, oh, I had a good year, when you add things up at the end and like, okay, so I was contributing. I was pulling my weight this year, but that doesn't happen every year by any stretch. And so if she hadn't been able to earn enough, if she hadn't been successful enough in her way, I don't know how I would have done things. I wouldn't have been able to be a guitar maker, I suppose. If it was all on me to support the family, I would have had to just get a crappy job that I hated.
Yeah.
So, you know, I stopped having those quite a while ago, but only because she's a successful enough artist that it keeps the bills paid.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is pretty remarkable for two artists to actually, like, you know, have a house, have kids.
You've successfully raised 3 daughters
Yeah.
at this point in time.
Well,
They're
you know,
mostly out.
they're never fully raised,
No,
are they?
no.
But they're getting there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and from what I can see, they're all very interesting and creative people. Also, actually, it's
Yeah, sadly, it would have been nice if at least one of them was a lawyer or an accountant. They're all creative. They're all interesting. Could have settled for one that was going to have a good retirement and health plan, but
yeah,
what are you going to do?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's their water.
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com. Are you serious about the business of guitar? Then you need to join us on Patreon. We're building a future where guitar makers are able to live prosperous lives making instruments that inspire the musical experience, which helps to create a more beautiful world. Where others who are passionate about the guitar can thrive, those who help in the promotion and resale, trade shows, writing of books and articles are supported as a valuable part of the community. A community where we explore with curiosity and encourage those around us in their endeavors. With a community effort, we can accomplish far more than we can individually. So let's be serious about your guitar business and join us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jamie Gale Music. We are better together, so let's do this together. I love where we've been, and I'm excited about where we're going.
So now you have some interesting choices about your guitar making also, and I remember you telling me a story about I think, if I remember correctly, the government clearing through an area and some trees coming down, and your father,
Oh, yeah, well,
and
so a lot
that
of the...
wood shows up often in your work. And so, tell us about that for a second.
Well, this was early days. I think right after university, I was convinced I'm going to be a guitar maker. I'm going to throw myself at this full time. And one of the things that happened was, my dad got word that when they were building the Highway 416 south of Ottawa, they had to cut down a grove of black walnut trees to make an on-ramp because, you know, there was an old farm that had been there and they'd planted this row of lovely black walnut trees, 200 years ago. And they all had to come down to make way for the on-ramp. My dad heard about it, knew the guy who had the contract to take down the trees, and so I got to pick up a black walnut tree. You could just buy the whole thing. Yeah. And so I did. We went out to this sawmill, the guy who was in charge of, cutting up the trees, and before they'd been cut up, there was just a pile of logs in his back lot, and he's like, go take your pick, whichever one you want. And, they're substantial, like almost 4 foot at the base trees. And so I'm just like climbing around on top of them, stomping on them, and trying to figure out where the best wood is and which one do I want. And I picked, this one. And we cut it up into eighths, like pie-shaped, quartered but eighth slices, and dragged those into my dad's basement to store them. And I've sort of been gradually chipping away at that tree ever since. That was 26 years ago, maybe, that we got that tree, and I still have a few sets, like acoustic guitar sets left. But yeah, I use that for a whole bunch of my electric guitars. I use that to make a bunch of the furniture in my house. I use that to make my workbench. My workbench is a pretty awesome workbench because it's made out of like quarter sawn slabs of black walnut, like 12 inches wide and 2 inches thick. And that was sort of a gift that keeps on giving, because if you buy a whole tree, it doesn't cost you very much, and you can just keep using it. It's a lot of work, and you got to give it plenty of time. But instead of spending $800 on a set of really nice figured walnut, you can buy an entire tree trunk delivered to your basement. So that was a good investment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. So you made your first guitar. It was something like an ES 175. Where does where does it start being something that someone would recognize as a Sankey guitar as we know it today? What's that moment?
Well, first of all, I hope there is never a Sankey guitar as we know it today, because I should always keep experimenting. Maybe you're referring specifically to the Live Edge electric guitars are probably sort of, that was a thing that I felt is like it's a path and it's a recognizable kind of shtick, but maybe a little better than that. That came from when I saw, and in university, I was, leafing through some books of design and oh yeah, I studied visual art in university. I should go there. And I was a sculpture technical assistant, so I'd help out in the sculpture workshop with other students building sculpture, and had some downtime every once in a while and could read the books on sculpture practice and things like that. And one of them had some furniture by George Nakashima, some photos of it, and I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. Furniture is not all right angles or even Scandinavian bent ply or whatever. Sometimes it's just nature, raw, live edged, just that. And then you intervene just enough to make it furniture and balanced. And so now it's no longer just a slab of tree, it is a table.
Yeah.
And all you've done is planed it, polished it, and given it just the right legs. Now it's a table. And it definitely reads as table and it works as table.
Yeah.
And the moment I saw that, I was like, this is beautiful design. This is perfect design. It does not get any better than this. And it took a long time for me to sort of figure out how to apply that to guitar making. And so the first live edge guitar I made, I must have started in about 2010, or maybe a little earlier, when I finally found a piece of wood going through some stacks at a lumber yard, and I thought to myself, this is a neat piece of wood, and I can see how there's a guitar in here that incorporates the live edge. And it came in a vision sort of based on all the sort of the doodles and designs that I'd sort of tried and drawn out before.
Yeah.
And I saw it in the piece of wood, and I saw where the guitar was going to be, and I was like, aha, there it is. And I'll take this piece of wood home, but it was still a little damp, and so I had to sit on it for a couple of years, and then eventually created that first live edge guitar. And I finished that one, I think, and oh, here comes a monarch butterfly. How lovely.
Just in from Mexico.
Yeah. They don't actually migrate one by one from Mexico. It's a multi-generational migration. Right. So they fly from Mexico to Texas, have babies in Texas, and the Texas babies fly to Carolinas, and then they have babies in the Carolinas, and they fly up to here, or whatever it is. Multi-generational migration, that's something.
Yeah. They get to Canada and their parents say, too far.
Go back
to Mexico.
Yeah. Although I think on the way back, it's different. Or one way is multi-generational, but then the other way,
as the jet stream, it takes them there.
Yeah, and it's like the final brood has bigger wings, and they're adapted for long distance flight. So they even look a little different from all the other monarchs, and they're the ones who travel, and then they fly all the way to Mexico and then die.
Have sex, then die. Yeah. That's an important part of the story.
As nature intended.
Yeah. So you finally found a live edge piece where you could take the inspiration of Nakashima's work in the way that it might influence your guitar making around 2010. Yeah. The live edge isn't the only thing. There's certainly lots of things that you do, and if I had to define your work, Mike, which I do have to define your
Yeah.
work, Mike. But I would say your work is defined by curiosity that stays close to nature.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you do, you sort of tend to really shy away from high gloss finishes and the really industrialized version of making a guitar, and tend to sort of really try and keep the naturalness of wood without necessarily the live edge. When you see an art shop guitar that you've made, whether it's a headless guitar or a guitar with a more traditional peg head and such, everything is very woody, very organic,
Well, it's very crafted.
industrial.
Yeah, and it actually comes from
Yes.
it sort of turns out that way, but the initial impetus is one of minimal intervention. First of all, be creatively lazy. A live edge table is easier than a not live edge table because you don't have to plane that last edge,
Yes.
in a sense. But yeah, and with a guitar, with an electric guitar, and yeah, with this live edge, it was a matter of how do I remove as little as possible to make this a guitar? What is the doing all these processes to a piece of wood? That's an industrial kind of thing that has to be done. And so many of the modern electric guitars and modern acoustic guitars, they're developed with the needs of mass production and industry in mind. And if you're just a one-person shop, which I am, and even was, and had no ambitions because I had no vision of it being bigger than that, it doesn't make sense. It's inefficient for me to emulate mass production techniques and industrial techniques because I have to buy industrial machines and I have to use jigs to do this, and you end up doing the same thing over and over again, and it's harder to make improvements because you've got a template or a mold that you have to follow, and you've got a machine that only cuts this particular way, and so it's highly specialized to to make things in an industrial setting, and then that just doesn't make sense with the handcrafted or with the one-person shop workflow. So if you're a one-person shop, wouldn't you adapt your workflow to match your circumstances? And if you're going to be, making things as a one-person shop, well, why not make it different every time? Because you can. Think of the Les Paul. Why does the Les Paul have a carved top? It was because Gibson looked at Fender's Telecaster and they're like, oh, well, in order to differentiate ourselves, let's do something that they can't. And that's part of the reason they had a top. It wasn't just as a visual, echo to their prior archtop guitar work. It was also I'll do something you can't, that differentiates my product. Well, I can make a guitar that's different every time, and Fender can't. Or not Fender specifically, and most guitar companies can't.
Yeah.
So that's something I can lean into. That's my superpower. I can make a guitar different every time because I'm just doing with a chisel and a spoke shave and a gouge. So that's why. Yeah, it is anti-industrial, but that's because that's the most efficient way for, a lone wolf to work.
I mean, yes and no, but we can get into that in a different conversation.
Yeah.
Because you did mention your heroes are Ken Parker and Louis Teufel, who make serial guitars.
Yes.
And are very much about refining their industrial processes. They continue to refine.
Yeah.
But that's for another conversation.
Yeah.
So back to Sankey guitars.
Because I was going to say, there are aspects of their work that I admire, and there are aspects of, also just as people, they're super cool people. But, the willingness to push boundaries aspect, that's heroic.
Yeah.
The results are heroic. The way they get there, I would love to have an interesting back and forth with them, because the way I get there is very different from the way they get there.
Yeah.
And I think my way's better, but that's why I do it my way. And they probably think their way is suited to them, and that's why they do it their way.
Yes. Yeah.
So the process is not what I find amazing, but the approach and the results, the mental approach and the product they produce.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're in 2010. You've done live edge guitars. Are there some moments now in your career which you think were defining for you that are important? You know, when the book was written on Sankey guitars, where are those moments going to say, and then this happened, you know, and then this happened? What happens after 2010? Because that's, well, 14 years ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. Well, that was a year. So after university, I spent a year trying to, thinking to myself, I'll be a guitar maker. And I produced a few archtop, I think 3 archtop guitars in that sort of time frame that I thought were good enough to sell. And I tried to shop them around to some various places. And no takers. They, they had their qualities, but they were not. It wasn't just that they were unique and different. That was, the reason the stores didn't take them. It was because they weren't good enough yet. But I had a hard time. Yeah, I had a hard time making any sales. I did not make sales. And so at a certain point, Helen's like, listen, you really need to actually get a paying job now. Don't we want, we want to start a family. We want to, get on with things. So get a paying job.
Yeah.
And that's when, the guitar making became more of a background thing. And then, and then we had our 3 kids in the early 2000s. And I was building guitars very part-time here and there when I could. But at a certain, and so eventually I always kept in mind that this was going to be important. And I started working for a music store doing I actually had a pretty cushy job at the university as their storekeeper. They had an art store there, so I was managing the art store. And I instead of that cushy job, I took a job to work for a music store as their sort of repair guy and part-time sales guy. And so that was sort of a watershed moment. Was I decided that I want to be in guitar making, and this is a pathway back in, is to take this sort of repair gig. Because part of my deal was, if I work for doing your repairs, you have to hang some of my guitars in your showroom. And they did. And took a very minimal commission. Again, that was part of the deal. And so I worked there for a few years doing repairs and getting, better at repairs. Because that was another thing. I was totally in over my head with repairs, but not knowing what to do. But I read the books and I learned on the job, so to speak, on some poor, unfortunate customers' guitars. But it all worked out. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough work. There weren't, because you're getting paid by portion, not by hour. So if you bring in a job and especially if you're pretty fast at your job, which I was, then at the end of the day you're like, I only earned $100 today, or that's not enough. And at a certain point, we parted ways. I think they fired me, and I was like, really? I was about to tell you guys that, I'm not getting enough work here. I need to do something else. And so that was the point where I was like, okay, this is the sign that I just have to stop this and just focus on building guitars. And that's when I started. I'd also picked up some clients, some commissions for new guitars, and I'd sold a few of the guitars through the guitar shop. So I was actually starting to make some sales as a guitar maker, and I was like, okay, I think I'm starting to get to the point where I can just make guitars and sell guitars. And I think that was about 2010 that I stepped away from that job, and I have not had proper income since then. So that was sort of a watershed moment. And another was the Montreal Guitar Show was in, around that time, and I went to that one as just a visitor, because I didn't get invited because I'm nobody at that point. I'm not really making anything that great. But Montreal's just down the road from Ottawa. So I went there a couple of times, and I got to meet people like Michael Spalt and Ken Parker. And Ken Parker, bless his soul, was the nicest person. And when, I saw his guitars for real life instead of just looking at pictures of them on the internet, and I'm like, oh, I'm so interested in these because I'm trying to be a guitar maker, and I built a few archtop guitars, and I'm trying to explore new design possibilities. And he was like, that's so cool. Here, why don't you play with it and take a look at it, have fun. And let me sit down behind his table and examine one of his Parker archtop guitars, and I was like, wow, this is the first guitar that sounds the way I've been trying to make my guitars sound, because all other archtop guitars do not sound or play or behave like that. And that was the first time I was like, oh, good. What I'm imagining and trying to shoot for is possible. And there's concrete proof. And so that was sort of, a very inspirational moment. And so at the Montreal Guitar Show, I went there a couple of times. Couldn't get myself invited as a guitar maker, despite asking. And so at a moment of despair, commiserating with one of my clients, he's like, well, we could just do our own show here in Ottawa. I mean, I work at the music studio where we've got some space. It's not a big place. It wouldn't be at the Montreal Guitar Show, but it'd be a little something. And so I started a little Ottawa guitar event. And that ran for 5 years, I guess. And we got bigger. And when the Montreal show ended, my show kept going for a couple of years in a very nice location in the Glebe. And I got to meet a lot of really, interesting people from Montreal. There's a lot of guitar makers in Montreal, and they would come down for the show. And just to sort of, that was a moment where you start being part of the community of guitar makers in Canada. And it was from there that I heard about the Holy Grail Guitar Show coming up later in the year. And so I applied for that, and they accepted me. And in 2014, I got to go to the Holy Grail Guitar Show in Berlin. And that's where I got introduced to the wider world of guitar makers. And that's, where I got to meet, Uli Teufel, for instance, sat down next to me at a lecture given by Grit Laskin. And he's just sat down, and I've never met him before in my life, but I'm very familiar with his work. And he says to me, oh, isn't it great, this Grit Laskin, that he's been around for so long, and somehow he finds the energy to just keep working at it. I hope I can still be a guitar maker when I'm his age. And I was like, yeah, I share the sentiment. and he's, anyway, so he was a good guy. And this is where I got introduced to the wider world of, of luthiery, and Ken Parker was there, and Jens Ritter was there, and these guys would come up to my table and see this fantastic headless archtop guitar that I'd made, and they're like, oh, this is cool, you should do this one. And so that was a big moment in 2014, was getting to realize that we're part of a big world, and I'm not the only person out here trying new things.
And the peer recognition.
Yeah. Well, I guess, recognition by clients is nicer because, when people are paying for your work, that's the ultimate recognition. But no, it was more a moment of, oh, there are other people out here who are exploring these, exploring design concepts, exploring the build processes. And we're not just all, trying to build dreadnoughts. Because sometimes that feels like the case. And what a journey, because only, 15 years earlier, and I'm trying to build an archtop guitar, and I have no physical reference point besides, going to the local music store and looking at, say, an ES 175 with a pressed maple top. And I'm like, this is not an archtop, but it looks sort of like one. And having no reference point. And then not so long later, I'm able to benchmark against, a Ken Parker. Yeah.
Great.
So I came a long way in a short amount of time because Ottawa, despite being a pretty big and important city, it's the capital of Ottawa, is kind of a backwater in a lot of ways when it comes to arts and culture, surprisingly. It's that big city with the small town feel. And that cuts both ways. And yeah, so you have to get out of the city in order to see the bigger, wider world and to see, the real examples that are out there.
Yeah. Great.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com. Are you serious about the business of guitar? Then you need to join us on Patreon. We're building a future where guitar makers are able to live prosperous lives making instruments that inspire the musical experience, which helps to create a more beautiful world. Where others who are passionate about the guitar can thrive, those who help in the promotion and resale, trade shows, writing of books and articles are supported as a valuable part of the community. A community where we explore with curiosity and encourage those around us in their endeavors. With a community effort, we can accomplish far more than we can individually. So let's be serious about your guitar business and join us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jamie Gale Music. We are better together, so let's do this together. I love where we've been, and I'm excited about where we're going.
So I don't know what your question was originally, but it ended with
those moments in your career that were defining for you. And so we talked about the Montreal show, you started your own show in Ottawa, and then getting invited to the Holy Grail Guitar Show.
Yeah.
So that must put you around 2014, 15, somewhere around there. Right?
So yeah, at that point, this was good. I went back in 2016 and exhibited a couple of other events. And you were probably at all the Holy Grail guitar shows, yeah. And so the first time I remember, seeing you as you were giving a talk or a panel discussion or something at the one in 2016. And I went with my friend Ian Weston, who you know, because he's also an Ottawa guy. And I met him through the Ottawa Guitar Show. There we go. He'd just moved to Ottawa, and so yeah, we've been friends ever since. And he went to Berlin with me, and he was like, well, who would help, who's good at selling this kind of thing is you got to talk to this guy, Jamie Gale. And you were at the show, and so, I don't know, at some point we had a little discussion.
Yeah. You came up to me.
Oh, okay.
And you said, I'd like you to play my nylon string archtop guitar.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. You walked up to me and said, I am Mike Sankey, basically, and I've got a guitar I want you to try.
Yeah.
So, and that happens to me fairly often, but often doesn't go anywhere, but it went somewhere with you.
Yeah.
So,
well, that was the first touch point, and then the next one was you were starting to do the boutique guitar showcase tours. You were sort of preparing for that, and you were finding material to go out on the road, and you came to the Sonore Festival in Montreal, and that was in this art gallery on the second floor on a blistering hot day.
no air conditioning.
It was like September. It was a freak show of it, but that was a good time. It was just it was a good party with some interesting people, and you showed up with your brother, I think, and I had a couple of live edge instruments, including a headless harp guitar.
Yeah.
And that was the time when so you were there and you tried out those instruments, and you're like, I think these could be part of the Boutique Guitar Showcase tour. We're leaving real soon to go to the United States, and why don't you send one of these along? And so I did. As soon as after the show, I packed it up and shipped it to wherever you were starting the tour from.
Yeah.
And it got held in customs for some unknown reason.
Fish and Wildlife held this.
Yeah, because they thought it had.
Guitar.
Yeah, because they thought it had pearl on it. And I was like, it's not. filled out the paperwork, I swear to God. And so eventually they released it, but at that point the tour was over, and I was so irritated. And I had an acoustic guitar that was due to do your European tour that we'd also agreed on. And I'm new to international shipping, and I'm running out of time here. I've just finished the guitar. I need it to be in Europe by next week, and I couldn't find, a way that was guaranteed to get it there in time. And I did not want a repeat of missing the tour. So at a certain point, I was like, screw it. I'm just going to take the guitar, get a last minute flight, even though this is going to cost me an arm and a leg. And Helen was not happy about this. It was a last minute, last minute flight to Copenhagen was never cheap. Yeah. And you guys were like, well, you can bring the guitar. We'll meet you in Copenhagen. You can have a bunk in the back of the RV as we drive across Europe, going to these stops. And I was grateful for the open-heartedness. I'd met you before, but I never met Roberta and the kids. But so yeah, well, I just showed up at the first event with a guitar. Hi, nice to meet you. We'll be living together in a very small space for the next week. But we all got along fine, and it was that was an interesting experience, yeah, because it's hard work doing the whole touring thing, and I helped as much as I could with just loading in dozens of guitar cases and packing them away and pushing RVs out of the mud. And
I don't know how long it was into the trip, but there was a point where we were crammed together at the little table in the RV eating, and you're like, we don't pay you guys enough.
I think this was probably although this was in downtown London near the North American Guitar Showroom, and you're surrounded by skyscrapers, and this is the very center of the empire, capitalism itself. This is the London Stock Exchange, and we're like eating spaghetti on an RV table, surrounded by the wealth of all nations. And we're just like, this is kind of funny. But yeah, because you can park an RV in a parking spot as long as you feed the meter.
And there's no time. Like we're there doing that because tomorrow night we have an event in Paris.
Yeah.
And we're not flying. We have to drive the guitars, right?
That was brutal. But I didn't, so I met with a friend and stayed overnight in London, went out for a proper London pint, and then hopped on the Eurostar so I could meet you in Paris the next day, which was much more comfortable. So, yeah.
So there you go.
So that's how I started with the Boutique Guitar Showcase, is when you guys were, at that fateful hot day in Montreal, where you were like, okay, I can take these guitars somewhere. And I think that helped to, not that alone, but you have to have like all sorts of different ways to get your guitars out into the world and get people trying them, especially if you've got a niche product. I couldn't sell my guitars in Ottawa alone. There just aren't enough people interested. In fact, I haven't sold a guitar in Ottawa in years and years and years. Not even very many in Canada as a whole. So you need to, or if you're making, I should say niche interest guitars, not everybody likes them. You have to get them in front of a lot of people to find that one person that says, I love that guitar. And so this was just one of the many approaches that I had to use to try and get out there. Obviously, website and social media, but you also have to get them physically in front of people. And doing the tours was one way to do that. And with a little luck, one becomes successful enough that word of mouth alone is able to drive your sales and your brand. But I'm not at that point. So yeah, you have to keep hustling.
All right, so we're in 2017, getting close to modern day.
Yeah.
Are there any moments that have happened since 2017? You're at Sonar, your guitar is now going to travel the world. You, surprised to yourself, found yourself traveling the world in the back of an RV, seeing. I think you were in 6 or 7 countries with us. at that point in
That
time.
was pretty. I slept the entire way through Belgium.
Right.
It was only a nap. It was like an hour.
Belgium, but yes.
I've been to Belgium, I swear. But
Belgium, yeah.
after that, yeah, well, I mean, everything seemed to be going pretty well. And pandemic happened in 2020.
Yeah.
And that sort of meant I was really starting to enjoy, this traveling and going to guitar shows. And in the meantime, my wife, Helen, was teaching at art retreats. Like she would, people would travel to a really lovely boutique hotel in, Morocco or the south of Spain, and she'll teach them watercolor techniques, and then they'll, go explore the area and do activities.
Yes.
Anyway, and it was a great business model that she really enjoys doing.
Yeah.
And so we were like, this is a fantastic way to travel and earn an income at the same time. And for me, I can tag along or I can go to guitar shows. That's my way of traveling and also hopefully getting some income, as well as tax write-offs. But the pandemic just killed all that. Kaboom. And we're just this year starting to recover. But from a guitar maker perspective, funny enough, and I'm not the only one, a lot of guitar makers found that their sales went up.
Yeah.
I sold everything I had in the first sort of year of the pandemic, as all of a sudden a lot of people are working from home, discovering that, I actually have more time on my hands. I can relax. I'm going to pick up the guitar again. Oh, you know what? I'm going to buy myself a nice guitar now. And it wasn't just because of a pandemic payout, but working from home, people discovered how nice it was. And I'm like, I know that. I've been working from home for, a decade. But yeah, so it was really good for a few years in terms of sales, but it was really bad in a lot of other ways because we were stuck at home, couldn't travel, everybody's cooped up. Poor kids are trying to finish high school on online classes. And yeah, it was not good for everybody's mental health or, physical health in my case. I almost died from a just random thing at that point. But yeah, it was for a couple of months there. I wasn't sure if I was ever going to be, like if that was curtains, if I wasn't going to be able to build anything ever again. But I bounced back. I'm fine.
Yeah.
And yeah, so even just a few months later, I was back in the workshop, building the calluses back up and keeping on going where I left off. So yeah, we made it through by the skin of our teeth. Everybody survived. And yeah, business was, there was that pandemic sort of boom. And then there was a bit of a bust time, which last year, 2023, was the big bust year. Surprisingly, even though things are just opening up and I was able to go to the NAMM show again. Yeah, so things were getting back to normal, and that's when sales just stop. I didn't get any commissions. Well, I got one, and I made one sale. And so that entire year was just terrible. And you never see it coming because the nature of, selling guitars as an artist is you never know when the next sale is going to happen. You never know when the next commission is going to happen. You just have to assume that you're going to get a certain number per year. And then they just don't arrive, and
you don't have any 10-year-old guitars, right? And so that they all sell. But when you make creative guitars like you do, where there's no momentum behind this model selling 50 times, you have to you go through these booms and busts, right? And so, but there's always another boom, and it's
well, one hopes. But yeah, I don't like having no income, and just having guitars sort of starting to stack up downstairs. Fortunately, this year things are picking up again. It's going a little better, but it's pretty scary to suddenly have no income. Again, fortunately, my wife Helen has, also had a pretty nasty dip, but not as bad, and she was able to pull us through. But yeah, it's been tough. It's very up and down, and I don't like that, but it's just that's part of the consequence of getting to do what you love and getting to be creative and getting to build a different instrument every time. Is you just, you know, if you want the same paycheck every week, you can work at Tim Hortons, and I'd probably earn more actually.
Are you ready to give it up and become an accountant or something?
Not an accountant per se, but sometimes, yeah, there are a lot of times when I think to myself, is it too late to switch to a different career? You know, because I'm 47, and one can tell yourself it's never too late to start over again. But on the other hand, do I want to? Because there are pros and cons, you know.
Yeah.
I think I could be a fantastic architect or industrial designer or something. But do I want to? I don't know. If I'm going to be an architect, maybe I'd rather be an artisanal architect, build houses the way I build guitars, one at a time, you know, and that's a very different thing, and it also means no steady paycheck.
Yes.
So, you know, I think the best antidote is just to be so successful that you can have a waiting list and just sell out everything you make. But I'm not there. I think being, it's like being a musician. If you never play the wrong note, you're not trying hard enough. You know, you want to be a great improviser, play a lot of wrong notes, because that's how you learn. And, you know, if you're selling out everything you make, you should try harder to make something that somebody doesn't want, because you're not pushing the boundaries of your own creative abilities.
So is there any moment that you think, if you look back, your family's watching your bio, someone's watching the bio, you're in the room with them, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't mention the... Are there any... like, not that you need to give credit to everyone in the world, but the point is there any, if you just reflect now, something that maybe is definitive for you as a person and as a guitar maker that we should cover before we wrap up?
Not specifically, but generally, you know, when the path or things you're exposed to as a child, you know, your family environment, and the kind of, approach that you have or that they have to things really can have a lasting impact on the rest of your life in a general sense. So even if specifically, you know, I didn't choose, or my mom didn't say, why don't you play cello, because you don't seem to be enjoying the violin. You know, but the general thing was that in my family environment, encouragement to explore and not be boxed in too much into a particular career path. At a certain point, you lose the ability to be an expert. Like if I'd had the kind of parents who were like, well, if you're going to play cello, you have to practice for an hour a day, and I'm going to stand over your shoulder and make sure, you know, my mom wasn't going to do that. She was a music teacher and also, you know, a modern parent, I suppose, and was more trying to encourage without being, you know, tiger mom or helicopter parent, because she didn't believe in that. And I think that's fine. So you give up the opportunity at, say, extreme expertise. Most people who are extremely good at something do it because they started when they were very young and they focused on it very highly. And it's not always just because of their own self. You know, maybe they tell themselves that after the fact, but, you know, they still had a mom that drove them to hockey practice at 6 a.m. every week and then cheered them on and fought with the coach or whatever. You know, that's how you get to the NHL. So having a more free-form, explore your own way approach does mean that in a sense I am not a master of my craft in a way that some people are. But it encourages exploration as, you know, as a designer and as a thinker and as a builder. One is encouraged to go one's own way, even at the expense of excellence at a specific thing. So yeah, I'd say, yeah, my parents were divorced or split up when I was 5 or something, and but they each sort of independently had their own way, very, you know, different parenting styles, but in their own way, they each encouraged independence and independent inquiry, and just to develop to be your own person. And I'm grateful for that. But even if they'd been different, I probably would have been grateful for the way they were. If they were, you know, super gung-ho helicopter parents, I probably would have been like, well, thank goodness I had such attentive parents, because otherwise I would never have become the best lawyer in Ottawa or something. Anyway, I don't know if that's relevant, but there it is. It's a very general sort of sense. You can be a parent, and as a parent, I know this because I am a parent of 3 kids who are getting to the age where they're starting to establish themselves. I know that there's different styles and ways of doing that, and that's the most important job of all I would say. Being a parent and how you approach parenting, and, you know, having a sort of hands-off approach has its advantages, but also its disadvantages. Who knows which is right? I don't know. They're going to be what they're going to be. And that's the way my guitars are too. That's something I guess I didn't think about it, but, you know, we say our guitars are our babies, and in a way, how we make guitars could be explained by the way we parent. And some of us let it be what it is going to be and say, you know, here it is, take it or leave it. We let it grow its own way. And it's going to be what it's going to be. And other people control the process. They control the result. And the result is perhaps very specifically what you want it to be. And that's how you get a great accountant. As opposed to maybe a good artist and maybe not.
Wow. A good sentiment to end on.
All right.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching and listening. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts. And a special thanks to those who support us on Patreon. It's your support that enables us to do this work.